When you think about those who wield absolute power, the people who rule through fear and command the fates of millions, it really all boils down to one final, inescapable question.
Right? It's a question that gets right to the heart of things like justice, history, and legacy. Does the arc of history, as they say, bend toward justice? Or does it sometimes just stop?
Well, when we look back at the record, two totally different paths emerge. On one hand, you have this incredibly violent public downfall. But on the other, there's this quiet escape, just fading away and avoiding any real judgment. These two fates could not be more different.
So first, let's dive into the ones who faced a reckoning. These are the endings that are brutal, fast, and, often deeply symbolic. They're delivered by the very same people they once oppressed.
A perfect example, Benito Mussolini. His fall from this strutting, powerful leader of fascist Italy to a corpse hanging from a gas station was just shockingly fast. He was found hiding in a convoy, disguised in a German military coat. Less than 48 hours later, his body was on public display for everyone to see.
And this is where it gets even crazier. The location of that display, Piazza Le Loreto in Milan, was no accident. It was the deliberate act of symbolic justice. See, it was the exact spot where his own regime had executed 15 resistance fighters just months before. It's as poetic, if really gruesome, kind of payback.
Okay, so fast forward a few decades, and you see a similar scene play out, but this time in the age of the smartphone. After 42 years of just brutal and frankly bizarre rule, Muammar Gaddafi was found hiding in a drainage pipe. His last moments, confused, bloody, pleading, were all captured on video and blasted out to the world. It was a chaotic end for a man who demanded absolute total control.
Now, I want you to think about this number for a second. 3. Because in just 3 days, Romania's dictator Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife Elena went from fleeing a revolution in a helicopter to facing a firing squad. Their trial lasted maybe an hour, and then footage of their execution was put on television just to prove to everyone that the regime had actually fallen. And then you have the Dominican Republic's El Jefe, Rafael Trujillo. His end wasn't a big popular uprising. Nope, it was a conspiracy. After 31 years of ruling the country like it was his own personal kingdom, he was ambushed on a highway by military officers who had once served him. A violent end, delivered from inside his own power structure.
But, not every dictator just waits for their enemies to show up at the door. Some choose to write their own final chapter. A last, desperate act of control.
The final hours of Adolf Hitler are just so surreal when you look at them. As his entire empire is literally crumbling above ground, he's down in his bunker engaged in this bizarre, almost bureaucratic process. There's a wedding, formal goodbyes to his staff, and then this meticulously planned suicide, all to make sure nothing was left for his enemies but some charred remains.
Now, for every dictator who dies in the street, there's another who dies in a bed. These are the tyrants who manage to completely elude justice, eventually succumbing to old age or illness, often surrounded by the very luxuries their rule denied to so many others.
The death of Joseph Stalin is just a masterclass in chilling irony. Here you have one of the most powerful men on the planet, and yet, when he was struck down by a stroke, nobody came to help him for almost half a day. So why?
The answer is just bone-chilling. The very weapon he used to maintain his power, absolute, paralyzing terror, was what ultimately sealed his fate. His guards were so terrified of entering his room uninvited that they just left him there to die. In the end, he was a victim of his own terrifying system.
The case of Chile's Augusto Pinochet is maybe the ultimate example of getting away with it. The contrast here is just staggering. You've got decades of accusations and legal battles for truly horrific crimes, and the result was absolutely nothing. He died an old man at 91, having dodged every single attempt to bring him to justice. And then, in one final, almost unbelievable twist of fate, he died on December 10th, International Human Rights Day, the very concept he had spent his life crushing. For his victims and their families, that historical footnote was just a bitter, bitter pill to swallow. Pol Pot, the man who oversaw the deaths of nearly 2 million Cambodians, also slipped right through the grasp of justice. After living as a fugitive for years, he died in his sleep,
apparently from a heart attack, right as plans were finally being made to hand him over to an international tribunal. He escaped at the last possible second.
And over in North Korea, Kim Jong-il's death from a heart attack wasn't so much an escape from justice as it was just a continuation of power. His end was peaceful, it was orderly, and it ensured his totalitarian dynasty would pass seamlessly to his son without any interruption.
So, after looking at all these completely different fates, what can we really say about the end of absolute power? What does it all mean for how we think about history and maybe even justice itself?
Well, if you look at the examples we just went through, it's pretty much a dead heat. A violent end at the hands of others is just as likely as dying peacefully from natural causes. It really shows there is no single, guaranteed fate for a tyrant. History doesn't promise a reckoning.
But here's the thing that really matters. The dictator's death becomes this incredibly powerful symbol. A violent end can offer a sense of catharsis, of closure. But a quiet death can leave behind a legacy of impunity and unresolved trauma that can last for generations.
Which leaves us all with this final, nagging question. For the worst tyrants in history, what does justice truly look like? Is it a firing squad? Is it a court of law? Or maybe is the total collapse of their monstrous ideology the only real form of justice we can ever hope for? That's something history is still trying to figure out.